Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have an amazing guest, an amazing conversation. We're going to talk about the CX wake up call. We're going to talk about why CX deserves a seat at the table, why CX is directly connected to long-term sustainable growth, ROI, to the point where every CEO and CFO should be having their KPIs directly pointed on CX. We have with us today Amita Gudipati. And Amita, you are the Chief Customer Officer at Renaissance Learning. Now, you didn't start out in CX. You actually started out in engineering. And I love how you bring an engineering point of view to this that we're going to get into later. And you work at Renaissance Learning across thousands of clients. One thing we're going to get into as well is how do you scale CX, even in that kind of an environment where it feels personalized? It feels like the human is still very much in the loop. What I'd love to do is I'd love to turn it over to you and just maybe explain a little bit more about your background, and then we're going to get right into it.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you, Steve, for having me. Like you said, every CEO and CFO, we're trying to convince for them to have a seat for CX at the table. I couldn't be more excited to be part of this because the last 15 plus years that I've been in the CX space, that's been one of the goals, is to show and drive the ROI and the value of CX and to show the importance of CX having a seat at the table. So thank you for having me. My role is the Chief Customer Officer at Renaissance Learning. We're an education software company. I have been in this industry 20 plus years. Like you said, started as an engineer, a hardcore developer in the chip designing space, and then pivoted and had an inflection point, which we'll certainly dive into. Have worked across different industries, tech and non-tech backgrounds. I have spent a lot of my time and experience in transforming and scaling organizations. So CX is my passion. That's where my heart lies. So I cannot wait to get into the conversation.
Good. That's a good place to start. Across our conversations, I very much felt the passion. And I wanted to set our bar here for every CXO, CEO, CRO, CMO that's listening in, that McKinsey did a study in 2023. 400 different companies, B2C, B2B, all highly profitable. And they determined that the number one differentiator in the market today is CX. I just like to put that as a foundation to our conversation here. That alone should have every CFO, CEO, CRO, CMO standing on the edge of their seat and saying, I got to lean in more to this. You got into it because you were passionate. Tell us a little bit about when you were an engineer and why this transition over to CX?
Yeah, I started my career as an electronics and communications engineer, joined a chip design company where I was working on designing chips, developing them, testing them end to end, and also supporting our customers globally. 5 to 6 years in doing the same role, I realized I didn't want to be put in that corner. I wanted to be more and also learn more. What I enjoyed the most about my job was supporting customers.
Yeah.
Then came a point where I shifted from hardware to software organization, made a full pivot from chip designing to full software, and took on multiple roles and responsibilities in the CX space. Having an engineering background and having some of that experience helped me look at experience very differently. Rather than it being just a service or a post-sale support, I started looking at it from early on as it's an architecture. Because when you think about customer success truly at the core, you have many disparate workflows and many different points of connection. You have onboarding, you have training, you have customer success and the relationship, you have renewals, you have sales and marketing.
Yeah.
So when all of these don't come together cohesively and we don't provide a seamless customer journey, that creates lag, latency, resulting in churn. I started asking the questions as an engineer. What are the breakpoints and failure points for our customers? Are we really reacting to noise? Are we building the journeys and the experience to scale? Which really helped me look at customer experience very differently, find my passion in building some of those models with scale and driving that value for our customers.
You mentioned a number of times in there scale. There's a belief set out there if you're going to scale CX, it's going to cost a lot more money. We kind of stop sometimes. Yeah, okay, AI is going to help out. We're going to scale with bots and we're going to do a lot there. But to really scale and not lose that human interaction and that human touch and that feeling, that's where I was fascinated in our last conversation, your engineering process management mentality behind it. You now, with thousands of customers, you said, we touch all of them and not with bots, with people. Tell us a little bit of how you do that.
Yeah, it's a super passionate topic and something I've been very proud of, and we touch every customer renaissance learning. When you think about scale, which is where my engineering background has helped, and just over the years being in customer experience world, you have to look at in three different buckets. What's the value add? What's the ROI? Or where is the outcome? You get all of these questions, and how are you going to touch? You cannot touch a certain segment and leave the others because there's an expectation. Every customer needs to get the same service. You're always challenged with driving scale, economies, as well as the margin pressures and efficiencies. So you kind of have to balance those pieces. In these three areas, I would suggest that following areas is where I've looked at is people, processes, and systems. Broke it down into three buckets. I start with the systems and then get to the people. And there's a reason why I go in that order. I start with the systems because the systems will help you achieve efficiencies and scale. You're not trying to build a model that works once, but you're trying to build a model that works 10,000 times and more. You need a system, you need the foundational framework of systems to help you achieve that. Then you're looking at the processes that are needed to help you be successful at touch. Now you have the systems, you know the processes, which also tells you what are the skills you need, what are the competencies of individuals you need that helps me go hire the right talent and the right level of talent that can support some of this skill. If you think about take Renaissance as an example, we have 20,000 plus customers and more globally as well. We have customers that are multi-million dollars. We have customers that are $500 and $1,000. You see the wide spectrum of service that we need to provide, but every customer expects the same level of interaction, same level of service. In order to provide that, we have to focus on these three pillars and also look at segmentation, tiering, identify the right touch point with the customer that involves a human, and where your automation or your AI is going to play a role in. Otherwise, you can very quickly confuse a customer and create breakdown and noise of what is noise versus what is a human, what is a bot. And the customer starts realizing it, then you start losing them. It's important for us to really put these in three buckets and then identifying what are the touch points that are meaningful, that drive value, that drive outcomes. Those are the ones you want to keep it human interaction. Then the remaining activities and touch points is where you want to look at automation or AI and tech, because otherwise, very soon you're really muddying the waters in driving that value. Very important in terms of how you think about those. We've been able to achieve touching every customer. We touch every customer every quarter. We look at their usage and we drive automation. We use our bot system to look at usage and drive some of those resources. But our human staff and our talent pool focuses on having value add, outcome driven, meaningful conversations. And that's how we've been able to balance touching every customer, yet keeping margins in check, yet keeping the pressures of the economy as well under balance.
You know, what's amazing about this is CX can be looked upon as one of the biggest cost centers in the business. I would say almost never one of the biggest revenue drivers in the business. But across the spectrum, one of the biggest drivers of new annual revenue in any business is existing customers. And you're talking to existing customers every single day. You have opportunities to steer the conversation, to cross-sell, to upsell, reinforce, make sure that loyalty is maintained. NRR, that's a metric that every CEO and CFO is going to want to know that you're focused on. It sounded like you put together a very proprietary process here, like systems and processes and then the right people. Did you develop your own software for this? Or is this something that the folks that are listening here is like, no, this is available. This is all technology that is available to any of us.
We use out of the box vanilla solutions that are available in the market. So anybody who's listening should absolutely feel comfortable and confident that they can set up CX at scale with the tools and softwares that are available in the market. What I have been very conscious of and what I want the listeners to be careful about is there are too many at this point. So what's going to be key is choosing the right tool for your system and your company, your environment, your customers, and your ecosystem, and being able to truly hone in on the landscape of tools and toolkit that you need. Let's say take onboarding as one example. There are about 20 plus onboarding platforms that are available for us to choose in the market. And 20 plus is just the top ones that I'm talking about, excluding the startups that are coming up every week with AI. In all of those, we've gone through an evaluation process, and I'm continuously looking at what are the new tools that are available and what's coming up in the market. Not every tool is the right tool for an organization. That's been an early realization for us. It feels very good. We get sold on what the product is, but seldom we forget that the product needs to be the right fit for us and our ecosystem. I want all of the listeners to really go through the process of what does our system and ecosystem look like? What are the right tools that fit our system? Because CX, like I said, Steve, has multiple touch points that span across an entire company, it's also important to understand the tools that are needed that work well and talk to each other. For example, Sales is, a well-known CRM. So I'll take that as an example. Not every application works well with Salesforce, but most do. As you're going through this process, it's important to understand you want to have a platform X for your onboarding. What should that CRM look like? And what should another platform look like for your customer success? Because they need to talk to each other to drive a unified, seamless experience that you want to build. Otherwise, you're going to have the best platforms that are available in the market. Once you implement, what you're going to realize is you still have to go to the manual processes of each team, but you're going to rely on systems to give you that. But building the whole seamless journey is going to be manual, which still takes away the efficiencies and the experience that you're trying to build.
It's amazing, right? Here we are, this day and age, and we're still talking about siloed data that doesn't talk to each other. But setting up those systems and those processes, if the data is not connected, then you just don't have the information that you need to make the decisions. We were talking about digital transformation, 10, 15 years ago, right? AI kind of like brought it up again in terms of importance. I'm really glad you made that point because it's how you put together those systems and those processes that allow you then to create that kind of scale. You talked about structural commitments in our last conversation and how you truly represent the voice of the customer. You talked about actions over words. And I just wanted to let you explain what you meant by all of that.
Yeah. Having been in this space for 15, 20 years, including my development life, every company, every organization talks about customer experience. They're very customer focused, they're customer centric. There are a lot of things that you share, and every company has something to that effect. What truly is important, and when you start parsing that higher statements out and you start looking and digging deep, is every company is not really living by the value of customer experience. We say it, we don't live by it. That's kind of what I meant by action over words is everybody says it, but how many live by it? Those who live by it are the ones that live longer and have longevity in terms of customers, longevity in terms of their growth, longevity and sustainability in terms of how many years they've been in the industry and the market as well. So that to me is very important. When you think about customer success and just its importance, having that sort of a thought process is just key.
It takes me back to that McKinsey study that I talked about earlier, right? Where only 15% of companies actually execute well on a voice of the customer program. I guarantee you 99.9% of those companies say that they're customer focused, they're customer obsessed. Nobody's not going to say that. Are you actually putting the actions behind your words? I love that. The biggest part of that is actually operationalizing the voice of the customer. They're the highest voice of authority in any of our businesses. If we're not listening, we're not taking action, and you're not translating the voice of the customer to the different departments, and you're just operating CX as a customer success group or a contact center, you're missing a huge opportunity. And I know you're very proud of the relationship you have with like your chief product officer and impacting roadmap. Explain how you get voice of the customer and then translate that out for the company.
Yeah, it's an exciting area of discussion because voice of customer and feedback has really evolved in the last 10 years. It was very disjointed in the years past. Over the years, that story has come together more stronger. Companies who have succeeded have really implemented a strong process. If you just take my own example at Renaissance, we have implemented 3 strategies for voice of customer. And I always keep it with a 3 by 3 because it's simple for everybody to absorb, everybody to understand, and action as well. So that's why you'll hear me say 3 by 3s a lot. We implemented 3 strategies for voice of our customers and feedback. One is our regular CSATs. We send out surveys to our customers, very operational, but it goes on a regular cadence across our wide range of customers on what did they like about our product? What would they love to see? What did they like about the experience? How can we do better? And how can we show up? You get a lot of that feedback and you synthesize it. The second strategy is through our QBRs, which are our quarterly business reviews and business reviews. We don't meet with everyday users of our platforms. Those are the moments where we bring in leadership from our customers and have a conversation that's more broader in nature. We're talking to the end users from their lens. We're also bringing the leadership to understand what their roadmap is. What would they like to see from our product, feature functionality, and roadmap? That's our second avenue where we bring information back. The third is we have customer advisory boards. We invite and we do a lot of the customer advisory group meetings across the country in various segments so that we hear from every segment of our customer base. What I mean by segment is they are ARR driven segments, they are strategic driven segments, and they're purely also size and complexity based segments as well. I will break them down into the different segments, if you will, to get that feedback. These are the 3 big initiatives. And obviously, as you can imagine, there's a lot of data that comes in because executive reviews give you another kind of data, and then your customer advisory boards give you another kind of data. But we wanted it. And what CX does is we simulate and we synthesize all of this information into more meaningful, structured output because that's important. Now, you've gotten all the input, great. To your point, there's a lot of data available. Now, how do you make sense of this to drive your actions and then to also filter some of the noise so that we can drive value for our customers, which is why I said we truly live by customer-centric behavior in our organization is precisely that. We now filter all of that information into the following. Starting with the high-level feature functionality requests, we also add color commentary on some of the customers with their revenue, what their complexity is, the different kind of product mix that they have. So we provide a flavor of that. The second then drills into more, what are the near-term wins we can have? These are the customers that have given us this feedback. Would be good to understand the level of effort so that we can at least tackle the low-hanging fruits, drive quick returns, and then what do we look at from a long term? And the last bucket is big changes that our customers are asking for, which need a lot more roadmap shift, if you will, Do we want to go that direction? Do we want to have follow-up deep dive discussions with our customers? So that's a little more long-term sort of a process. We break it down into these three buckets so that helps us understand what can be our short-term roadmap, how much needs to go into our long-term roadmap, what's going to be the value, revenue versus realization benefit for our customers. And are we solving for the norm or are we solving for the exception of 2 workflows per customer? Then we also discuss collectively, do we want to customize or do we want to optimize in the product? Because both of them have very different economies of scale when you're thinking about customer experience. We truly bring all of that voice back from our customers, and we also synthesize that. I want to close that with the most important piece of this process is follow through. How to close the feedback loop. Because customers lose interest, customers don't show up, nor would express any interest if you're not really closing the loop back with them.
So telling
With all the
them what you learned, literally like coming back and not just taking it as internal learning and then, but you're actually replaying back to them what you heard.
Yes. So what we do is not just think of it like if I'm a customer who constantly fills out surveys, or I'm a customer part of my advisory board, I give feedback. I've spent a lot of my time and my effort because I'm invested in an organization and I believe in the product. And I'm taking that time to show the respect. We should always close the feedback loop. Or as a customer, I'm thinking, okay, did that come in the product? Did it not? What happened to the time I spent? Those are the moments you realize over time that you lose your customer base with it. We put in a very conscious effort to close that loop with our customers. In these segments, we do a human touch point as well. Based on the segment and the tier, we also send out like a synopsis to our customers. And, here is all the feedback we've received, output summary of the feedback. Here are things that we're going to do in the short term. We will keep you posted. There's a roadmap we'll share with you as it comes. And then there are pieces that are being worked in the long term. We'll keep you posted. So at least the customer knows that they're being heard. We're taking action, and then we're closing the loop with them, which is very important.
2 big takeaways from what you just said is A, what tremendous learning. Here's the first question, and it's not a facetious question. If you weren't doing this, who would be? That's an incredible insights and information that you're gathering together. If you and your team wasn't doing it, would it be done? And would all of those benefits really be benefiting the organization?
Yeah, and it's been a fascinating learning. I started my sort of customer experience journey 15, 16 years ago as a CSM. We were not doing it. There was not a function, there was not a team that was responsible for the voice of customer. We would get very disparate feedbacks, whether it was during a renewal or during a sale when sales was trying to sell. It was not cohesive. Over the years, even studies show if you've connected your customer, you've shown them value, which means there is a higher chance of retention. A higher chance of retention drives expansion as well, not just renewal. In the world, Steve, that we've been living in for the last 5, 6 years, at least in the software SaaS tech space, there's less of net new logo. There is more and more retention and acquisition within that same customer base via expansion. Voice of customer, the experience all plays a part in driving that sustainable growth, which is where CX becomes very important. We've had a seat at the table with the product team. Like I said, my chief product officer and me are very tied, closely working on customer feedback. What should be the roadmap look like for the short term from a customer retention standpoint? How can we improve those experiences? And how do we balance between new feature functionality as well as existing feature functionality requests from our customers? It's not easy. It's a balance, but you can get there and you got to start somewhere. Like I said, at least the structure that I provided hopefully helps the audience start with those steps.
So how do you translate all of that? Because we can hear all of that and say, that's amazing. Obviously, it has huge impact. Now, when you're talking to your CEO and your CFO, and you're having budget conversations, right? You're having ROI conversations. Like,
Promote fun conversations.
how do you translate all that amazing knowledge that you're sharing with the organization and show it as something that the ROI is clearly understood and directly attributed to growth, revenue, NRR, whatever it is?
The way I talk to my board or my sponsors, as well as the CFO and the CEO, because this is a conversation we're having almost every week, every 2 weeks, we're looking at retention and the renewal rates as well. Those are our two true North Star metrics. Year on year is how we look at, because obviously every year your base that's up for renewal is different, right? So the way we measure is one, what is truly up for renewal and what does that renewal rate look like? Because if your customer is happy, if your customer is getting the experience, and if your customer is able to realize the value on the products that you're offering, they renew. So that's our key metric, retention renewal rate. The second is we look at how many of these customers we've provided featured functionality to, because they've given the feedback. We take those data points that we've had, we connect it to the retention, and we also look at, did any expansion come from it? Because those are tangible. Not easy because, you have subjective information and then you have data points. Always not easy, but you have to be very thoughtful about how you connect those points. But we show, here are all the bugs, defects that we solved. Here are all the short-term feature functionalities that we've resolved. This is the list of the customer base. And here has been their renewal rate as well as expansion year over year, which is a good measure for us. The other metric that we've measured over time, and I've measured in my years past, is a multi-year renewal. If I'm a customer, I'm happy. I'm not just signing you up for 1 year because I don't want to just see what happens in the next year. If I'm happy, I'll renew. If not, I'll see if I want to shop around. That's also another success metric that we look at, is has the customer renewed for more than 1 year with us? Because now telling me they're committed, they're happy, they see that we're being their partners and we're providing that experience. So they don't want to get into this renewal cycle every year, but they're with us and are committing for 2 or 3 years or so. We have customers who've renewed with us for 5+ years, and 5 years is like the mark. So sort of our other success measure, where I get to stand up there with my sponsors and the CEO and the CFO to say, here is the customer base, here is the feedback, here's what it's translated into, hence here is the growth that we've contributed overall, which has been a partnership but led primarily by CX. So if you think about the last few years, it's in summary, we didn't have voice of customer before when SaaS started. The relevance and the importance of it grew over time and over the years. Now there are robust measures and structures that we can put in place. We have to be very structured about showing the ROI. That's where a lot of SaaS companies that I consult with are struggling and feeling challenged to show that ROI and translate into it. There's a way to show that. And then the value automatically in the ROI of CX or voice of customer just naturally explains itself.
I wish we had 2 more hours because this is fascinating, but I want to ask you one last question. And that is, we've covered so much ground, so much territory here, and our poor human minds can only take about 2 or 3 things in at a time. If there was one thing that you wanted the C-suite executives that are going to be listening to this conversation take away, the one thing, the most important thing that they should take away, what is it?
Customer experience is not just a department or a function, but it is a design model and a growth strategy that every organization, CEO, CXO, CFOs, anybody who's thinking about this should absolutely invest.
That's quotable. Design model and growth strategy. I know there's going to be a lot of CX individuals that are going to be watching this, and they're going to think, I don't have a seat at the table. I don't have what Amita has. But you've given us a path and the conviction that this really is so important that you should have that seat at the table. The mission of this podcast is to bring different perspectives on growth, B2B growth models that matter. And if we can learn from all kinds of different perspectives and different C-suite executives and their roles and their perspectives and experiences, then it's like the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you were an amazing part of that rising tide today. I just wanted to say thank you.
I'm so happy to be part of it because I have been on this journey myself of showing and trying to prove the value add of CX and having that important seat at the table. I can now confidently say, yes, companies might feel and might not see that path to ROI right off the bat because CX is not your traditional sales or marketing where you can see leads, you can see funnel, you can see pipeline. But at the end of the day, every SaaS company needs retention and expansion into that base, which is where CX plays a part. So give it that shot for a year or two, and you will naturally start seeing the benefits. There's not going to be a conversation on ROI anymore for CX.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Amita, for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure as well. Whatever I can do for CX to have that seat at the table and just have that voice, happy to contribute because that's been one of my passion areas as well.